Hello, everyone. Rachel Weaver here. I am on faculty and staff at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. I've been making a series of videos in which I ask debut authors to tell us the story of how their book came to be. So I have Brian Kagan here with me today. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Rachel.
Brian is the author of a collection of personal essays called My Shorts, and it came out recently, right? A couple months ago?
It came out on February 1st, and yeah, so this is what it looks like.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so Brian, I'm going to make your video big and then hand it off to you, and you can tell us sort of the story of how it all came together from the moment that you were like, I know, I'm going to write a book.
Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm.
So am I on?
You're on.
Okay. Wow, this is great. Thanks for having me here, Rachel. It's been an amazing journey. I have spent the majority of my career in the marketing brand advisory business. So I worked with a lot of companies and good fortune to work with celebrities and help them to write their brand stories. And as a result of that, I've always played with writing all my life, but did it for other people. So when I decided to end this particular career after 40 plus years, I decided maybe it's time for me to write my own story. So it really started out as just some, I was thinking about some stories about my faith journey and some other things. And I realized that, I could probably use some guidance on how to be more professional in my writing. And so, lucky me, this is not a commercial for Lighthouse, but I'll plug it anyway. It turns out that my neighbor said, Brian, there's one of the top writing schools, professional writing schools in the country is 4 blocks from you. And so I heard about Lighthouse. I went to some classes there, and it totally changed my life. Especially to realize I was not as good a writer as I thought I was, and especially in areas and techniques that I had never even heard of. So by doing this, I realized that what I really wanted to do was to write some personal essays. And I had this idea about writing a series of short personal essays. And so that's how the name My Shorts came up. And I don't know. I think my mom channeled into me when she died because she was very funny and very wacky, sort of a cross between George Costanza's mom and Joan Rivers on steroids. And I decided to write about this, some of these crazy stories that happened to me growing up as a middle child in a Jewish family. And one thing led to another, and I started writing some of these pieces. And as I continued to take some courses at Lighthouse, I learned some things. It really was so helpful to learning about things like narrative distance. Never heard of that. Didn't know any of these things were. And found out that really what I enjoyed doing most was bringing people into these situations so that I could share them with them. And these stories, as I wrote them, I realized what was happening for me was both challenging and very cathartic, very healing. Because being a middle child and especially in a Jewish family, there's a little guilt that's involved with this. And I had other issues growing up. And so as I began to write them, it was very healing and very cathartic to tell these stories. And so so I got into it, and it took me 3.5 years to do this. And I think that for me, the things that I wouldn't change any of it, but what I didn't know, and even though I was told this by some great teachers, including you, who I've taken a number of classes with, what was said to us was it is not an easy task. It involves a lot of commitment and a lot of focus and a lot of discipline. And as a guy who has raging ADD, that was a challenge for me. But I got into a rhythm. I would write for at least 2 to 3 hours every day. And the thing that, and it really, I finally ended up with a manuscript, if you will. And the thing that surprised me the most was how many edits were involved. So there was, I probably did over 100 edits on this book. Some of the pieces over and over and over again. And one of the hardest things as a writer was allowing people to make comments and listen to them and be curious, even if I didn't agree with them, and not be so protective of my writing that I wouldn't be curious to listen and understand why someone might be saying what they were saying, which really helped in the editing process. And the other thing that was told to me was, and this was one of the hardest things, because it's like it's like the creation of a child. This is your jewel, your masterpiece. And some of the things I wrote in there, I thought, oh, this is such a great, funny line. I think this will be great. I think it's hysterical. And people would say, and the best instruction I got, if there was only one thing I remember, it would be, don't do anything that takes you out of the story. If you do something that takes the reader out of the story, then that makes it harder for them to connect and follow. So keep with the flow. So what I had to do is I had to cut out things, and I kept them in a file. I would say to any author, if you cut things out, put them in some place, because they may be jewels for later. But the economy of words, I think, is such an important thing to understand, and that you're writing for other people to read it and not to entertain yourself. That was a hard thing to let go of that. I think the other thing for me that was enlightening was this idea of character developing through dialogue. This idea about dialogue and narrative distance. I knew nothing about this, but when I came to understand the difference between telling somebody something and showing them something, helped to really transform my writing, so that I started to answer questions people might have through shared narrative between different people, dialogue, and give them hints and unfold that. I would use pop culture references to convey a scene and to make it as sensorial and visceral as possible. The other thing I would say is writing a book is not for the faint of heart, because it takes tremendous commitment. And then you get to a point where you can always make it different. You can make changes, but there is a point where you have to say, I can make it different, but I'm not sure I can make it better. And then at some point, and I think you said this to us, Rachel, it's like you get to a point, you finished it, and it's a kid that's become an adolescent, that's become a teenager, and now you're putting them out in the world. And so you put it out there, and when I released it, of course, that was a big moment. And then getting critique and getting comments, it's very interesting to hear people say things, and then the fur goes up on your back. But wait a minute, and you have to let go of that, because it's out there in the world. It's going to make its own impression. It's going to have its own relationship. The other thing I would tell you is, especially for indie authors, I'm 68 years old, and I decided once I did a little attempt to find an agent, and I figured I'd probably be dead before I found one that would pick up my book and publish it as a new author. And so this idea about working as an independent author, the thing I will tell you is writing the book is probably the easiest thing you're going to do, because marketing it, because even if you have a publisher, you're going to do most of the marketing. And that has been an amazing adventure. It is a full-time job, especially for us older folks who are not as connected to social media and all the Instagram and this and that and oh my gosh. It has been amazing. what I did that really helped me is I hired a company to help me do the things I'm not the best at. So they helped me with final editing and all the sweetening and all the things to get it ready, and brought a social media partner in there to help me do those things so that I could focus on writing. And one of the things I've done, you helped me with this as well, Rachel, is I've been trying to get into reading groups. I've written some articles that have been published, and it promotes me through different magazines. And what will happen is you'll launch your book, and all of your friends, whether you had 100 or 500, most of them will buy your book, and you're going to get real excited. And then after you run out of your friends, it is guerrilla marketing. And you just have to remember, and this is what I've accepted, it is a marathon. You are climbing a mountain, and it's worth the climb. It's worth, there's no feeling like it. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm actually excited to keep on writing and do another book.
And so I have a couple questions about the self-publishing process. What was the most unexpected thing about the publishing? Nice job.
Well, that's part of it, by the way. You have to be willing to pimp yourself a bit and have fun with it. So what you asked the question, what was the hardest part about it?
No, what was the most unexpected thing? Like, what was something that happened, in the process of self-publishing that you didn't anticipate?
Really good. That's a really good question. The first thing I would have to say would be how hard it is, all the different things you have to know about Amazon, KDP, Kindle Direct, Ingram Spark, who you're going to use. If you use this guy, you can't. If you use Amazon, that was probably one of the most interesting things, was Amazon.
Right,
and
as
understanding, yeah, that platform, while it is essential, you can't deny the fact that they are the monster. The thing that I decided to do was to do their KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing. That was Select or whatever it is. And they lock you up for the first 90 days. You can't do anything but through Kindle and Amazon. That was a shock to me. That was one of the shocks. The other thing I wasn't expecting, I thought I recorded my own audiobook, and I've gotten a lot of praise about it, but I found out, and I also have an ebook. Surprisingly to me, pardon me, very few people want audiobooks, as I'm finding, unless you're a Michelle Obama or somebody like that. I was surprised about how many people are not interested in audiobooks. I found that, of course, a lot of people, I thought ebooks was going to way outdo everything, but I was amazed how many people really do want print. So I'm learning as I go. The other thing I have learned is to spend your product. Meaning, for instance, one of the things I came to know that I didn't know was Goodreads, which is a great, which I love, because it's a platform where authors and readers can interact. And I just ran a promotion giving away 100 free books, which helps to grow my audience. So what I realize now is you've got to build your social media following. That is the key. Because at some point, if you ever do want to get a publisher to look at you, you need to come in with 1,000 or more people following you, et cetera, et cetera. So those are pretty much the biggest surprises.
Right, and the Goodreads, the benefit of giving away books on Goodreads is that people enter, they click to be considered for the free book, and what that does is it puts your book on their to-read bookshelf.
Correct.
And then all of their friends get a little notice like, oh, hey, Rachel just put this book on her to-read list, right? And you can do that over and over and over and over. I did that like I think they let you do it like once every month or something. I did the same thing with my book.
Yeah.
And it was really useful.
Yeah, give them away because they don't cost you anything. I mean, the ebooks are free for all intents and purposes, so there's more profit there. What I was going to say about that is, I forgot.
Any advice you have before we go? Any advice for someone who is considering self-publishing their manuscript?
Yes. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. I have a very successful career as a marketing consultant. I have a very successful career doing that. I had no idea how different writing, publishing a book is. I worked with I'll just say their name. I worked with a company out of Seattle called Girl Friday Productions. And had I not worked with them, I would be in such a deep pit. People don't, first of all, write it. I say vomit out the words, just get it all out. Then go to a school, work with a coach and refine. But surround yourself with people who have done this before and can help you position yourself to be successful, because you don't know what you don't know. And when it comes to self-publishing, there's a ton you don't know. And I think a lot of people think, if I just put it on Amazon, they'll come. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah, and I think the statistic I got was, I think every week, 4,300 new books by independent authors are released. Do the math.
That's a lot.
So you need, it's sort of like the mindset of going to a casino. There is no way the house will always win. The house odds are against you. But in blackjack, for instance, if you know when the deck is filled with face cards and aces, the house odds come down. That's when you can win. So what you want to do is to go in and position yourself to succeed and keep at it. I committed to at least a year. I work it every day. I keep going after it. Just don't give up. And the other thing I would say, just writing it and releasing it, you're a huge success. Because the odds of making money at this are not high. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it is such an achievement, and I feel so successful no matter how many books I sell, having done it and knowing my book is in the Library of Congress.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and go to Lighthouse. They're the best.
Thanks, Brian. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it.
Sure.